Here at MCAT Savior, we believe full-length tests are super useful, but if they're used improperly, they're actually just a major waste of time. So let's take a look at some of the common myths surrounding full-length exams so students can get an idea of why we're saying what we are. The first off, and the one that crushes students' souls the most, is the belief that full-length tests will give you an accurate predicted score. Now, here's one important distinction to make. Is this full-length from a third-party company or a non-AAMC company, or is it from AAMC? The reason why this is so important is because the AAMC is a professional test prep company and test making company. So their full-length tests, especially the ones that spit out a score at the end, are statistically benchmarked and weighted against their own internal standard. So for the most part, the scores that AAMC's practice tests spit out, especially as you get further and further along their FLs, meaning if you're going to take the exam soon and a score on the most recent FL is different than the score on the first FL you took, the more recent FL is probably going to be the one that's more indicative of your real world performance. In this situation, these scores are pretty good. There's still variability, but it's okay to use them to some degree to help predict where you're going to go on test day. But like we always say, test day is its own animal. Third parties, on the other hand, are a little bit more unique. These are independent test prep companies that don't write the MCAT, like they're non-AAMC test prep companies. Not every company benchmarks their full-length exams and their scaled scores to the same standards or statistical weights. Meaning, if you take a full-length test from one company and then take another full-length test from another company, and you have widely different scores and you're scratching your head thinking, did I get better at this exam? Did I get really good at this exam? Most probably it's just a unique thing in the way that they scale their scores up. So it can be very, very frustrating for students, but that's why we think that if you're using the third-party tests to measure your predicted score, it's not going to be the most effective use of the exams. Since the data can help you track macro trends over your growth through your study plan, it's going to be very unlikely it gives you an accurate predicted score. So take these with a grain of salt. Now, myth number 2. You can get better at full-length tests just by doing more of them. This is one of the most painful myths for most students because they believe that if they just increase their practice volume, they can get results. The unfortunate truth is full-length exams are super difficult to do. It pretty much takes one day to do them and then one day to review them. And since they're so miserable, students are just not only tired, but they just hate the process itself. Full-length tests are meant to be an application of your knowledge and skills in a test-based setting to see how good you do in a real test-based environment. They are an application of the skills and knowledge that you were supposed to obtain outside of full-length exams. We hope that makes sense to students as a whole. Even though, yes, you do need an adequate volume of full-length tests, especially leading up to test day, in order to test your overall test-taking skill and stamina, doing them too early in your study schedule can actually have a detrimental effect because imagine if you took 2 days a week to do full-length tests, which minimized the amount of skills work you were doing, and then later, when your skills didn't grow as much, you would be wondering where the time went. I mean, on top of completely exhausting students, we don't believe that full-length tests very early on in the study schedule are that effective. And this is something we discuss at length in our study schedule module that's part of our study plan strategy set that's available for free on our website. It goes through a big discussion on when you should schedule full-length exams, just because that is a major contention point for a lot of students, and you don't want to be doing them too early because you won't really have the knowledge and skills to apply. You'll just be sitting there for a lot of hours doing a miserable test, which many of our students have hated to do in the past. Now, last but not least, myth number 3. This is a big misconception, and it's something that's very common among the vast majority of test takers, and it's the belief that you can learn content from full-length tests and especially reviewing the exams. We believe honestly that this does not work in practice for the vast majority of students because remember, 2 days to do and review the exam is exhausting. You are not in the mental space where you actually want to learn material. You can get good at applying the knowledge that you already have in a test-based format like we discussed previously, but it's very hard to learn new material, especially on exam review. And it's also very hard to hunt down your weaknesses since on every single section, there's thousands of topics that could show up. Just because you missed a streak of a certain amount of questions doesn't mean you're actually that weak in that section. But of course, that type of data does become much more valuable down the line towards the end of your study period when you've already maxed out your content knowledge and you're wondering if there's systemic areas where you can't apply the knowledge as well, or maybe need to brush up on a few facts. At the end of the day, remember, there's only 177 science-based questions. If you're scoring about a 500 on this exam, you're getting roughly 60% of these questions correct, depending on whichever company is grading your test. You're basically left to hunt down the facts and details from around 90-ish questions. And of course, you could learn the facts and details from those 90 questions and you would be a little bit better off. But imagine if you just did a deck of flashcards for an hour and a half and memorized 90 facts. That would be pretty great, and it didn't take you 2 days to do it. So remember, full-length tests are super important, and they really do factor into a student's long-term growth and capability, but not if they're misused or used inappropriately. So we hope this gives you a better idea of how you should use full-length tests, and feel free to check out the rest of our material if you need more help. Alright, that was a complicated lesson. If you still need help, check out our full-length blog post that we linked in the video description, explore more of our YouTube channel, or just head on over to MCATsavior.com where you can get all of our strategy courses for free.